or Valnet or angel investors of some sorts, and they'll all have their own motives.
Yeah.
But I'm mainly speaking I kind of touched all of these models from my own
Yeah.
professional experience, so
No,
I feel enlightened in a way.
yeah, no, and I think that's really helpful, and why I wanted to kind of start off with this, because I think it will kind of go into a little bit in our next topic, because it's like having someone of an understanding of, yes, you're right, it is a complicated answer. There's a lot of different reasons or quotas or objectives that people have to hit, but reaching out to some of these entities, having at least that basic understanding from what you provided gives people a sense of like, okay, if I know what they're looking for, maybe I can take a certain approach in making sure that I'm doing everything that it's going to make them happy and in turn make me happy. So I love how you kind of provided the whole breadth of what those possibilities are, because it really gives people further insight in terms of, at the end of the day, what do they care about, because it's going to be hard enough to have them care about you and your game if you're not necessarily thinking about their interests and needs. So thank you, because I think that's quite extensive and, like you said, complicated, but getting down in a sense of what that is definitely helpful, and allows you to form strategies and things like that. So speaking of strategies, I thought it would be good to kind of like discuss what are some effective, strategies, devs can use to build stronger relationships with the media, because, at the core of what we're talking about today is definitely, building those relationships with media. And in light of that, I was thinking like, as an indie dev studio that is relatively unknown, is it important to be mindful of your public image when you're reaching out and building relationships with the media?
Oh, totally. I mean, you want to build that goodwill with not only people in games media, but also potential customers and consumers of whatever you're working on. And as much as I am like bagging on Twitter, I mean, it is a very essential component to all of this. Public image will probably come from how you use social media, and how studios should use that. It really comes to common sense. Like, I shouldn't have to say that if you say things that are bigoted from your studio account, that's probably not going to build goodwill and will not be good for your public image. But yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of different studios, mainly indie devs, kind of approach that differently, where they kind of pardon my French, they utilize shit posting, let's say, to like, making memes or whatever to kind of attract attention, or and I can get into it later, but some developers love sharing kind of like development stories or animations or GIFs or little videos that kind of show what they're doing and kind of gauge interest. So is it important? Absolutely.
Yeah, no, and that's good, because I mean, some of it kind of sounds, I would say, kind of obvious to an extent, that's like you keeping your public image in mind and stuff, and it's funny because I have seen some studios too where they try to maybe keep the same tonality of, let's say, a particular game that might be, let's say, a little edgy, or push the envelope in some cases, and they might maintain that, but in some cases, like me personally, I feel that there's almost too far you can be going, because from a public image standpoint, outside of just potential customers or fans or things like that, I would assume it could possibly come up where the media itself could be a little bit maybe discouraged or not necessarily in line with covering something like that if it doesn't necessarily align with their overall views and things like that. Is that a good way of thinking about things too in terms of public image?
Totally. I mean, a lot of there. I can name a number of cases where that exact scenario occurred. Like I can mouth off about Ion Fury or Cyberpunk or THQ Nordic for days. Those all kind of bungled things in a way that caused bad press, that created bad headlines that kind of put them on a target. So how you conduct yourself on social media, I think, really reflects on how you are as people and like, should they trust you? Like, are you someone I should buy your product from?
Yeah, and it's also a good thing to kind of lead with as you're looking to establish those relationships with the media and giving that good first impression, so to speak, that can kind of like lead you forward in terms of establishing and building that relationship. So, with that said, like, what would you say is the best way to start building media relationships?
Just from being on the other end of that, I mean, the main method that these developers and publishers and other PR folk kind of try is just cold emailing.
Mm.
It's and yeah, that's a pretty standard and easy thing to do. I mean, if you go to most outlets and websites, they will have probably like an about page or a contact page. Will have like probably a form or perhaps an email address. It's probably going to be like press@whatever.com. And, just sell yourself. You can say like, hey, these are some projects that we worked on before, or like our director has like been in this studio before and whatnot, or like most most of these cold emails will probably compare the project to other familiar titles, and that's a good way to kind of just get that in your head of like, oh, okay, yeah, it's like that thing. I kind of know what this thing is. And again, social media. I mean, following outlets on Twitter can be beneficial. It's there. I feel like there's a lot of politicking involved with social media follows, and it's like, are they going to follow back or not? And it's honestly such a small thing that people make a big deal out of. But if they notice and they follow you back, like, all power to you, I would say.
Yep. Cool. And you already kind of outlined one here that you just mentioned, but like, what other kinds of activities would you suggest that devs can engage to even like not just start building those relationships, but also building more rapport with journalists prior to asking for coverage?
Yeah, I mean, if there is a way you can kind of get them to notice your project even before you send that request, that'll probably give you a better leg to stand on.
Okay.
And for the umpteenth time, like, that will be social media. I mean, yep. I mentioned before the GIFs or the videos or what. Like, I've seen a lot of those that involve, hey, here's this really unique art style, or hey, here's this animation of this dude walking that is like kind of different from something you've seen before. I have some friends who are kind of removed from games journalism, and they find indie games through this way. They will be looking in like hashtags that are something like hashtag indie game or hashtag game development, or some people that they follow might retweet those things or share those things. And honestly, like working for Uppercut, some of my colleagues who needed me to like request a game for them, they found the game like not from a trailer, but from social media.
Okay. And just doing like basic searches like that or whatever, right?
Totally. Yeah. And like things just organically, to some degree, go viral, so if it's like building word of mouth, I think is something really valuable you can do on social media. And if you send an email after that, like maybe the person who's reading is like, oh, okay, yeah, I saw that thing. Yeah, we can check that out.
Yeah.
So that's how it's went in many cases.
And in another case, like, and basically what what you're saying here is it can help provide like another touch point, so to speak, for that person who's researching or looking out for another article to write something on, and they see something, and then you reach out to them, and that's when they say it's like also could be timing and luck and other things, but the fact is you increase those things from happening by like engaging in other activities just to like kind of be a little bit more known to those entities, to the media. Now, you mentioned before about emails. Like, that's actually probably one of the best ways to do that, is just like cold emailing is a good starting point. Now, I understand, and I'm sure a lot of other people, that, it can definitely be difficult to stand out among hundreds of emails, because I'm pretty sure, at least, that journalists get a lot of
Yes, you're right.
emails.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm yes, there's a lot of different strategies to stand out in terms of like subject lining stuff, but emails aside, is it ever worth like trying different methods, or like picking up the phone even, to contact a journalist? Or are there other methods that are available that can be effective? What would you say to about, at least let's start off with picking up the phone? Is it worth it?
Well, maybe it's just because I haven't been in the game as long as some other people.
Hmm.
Like who knows what that could have looked like in like the mid aughts or something like that, when
Right.
social media was less prevalent. But as a as a millennial games journalist who's been in the game for a couple of years, I've never personally utilized phone. Like I have my phone number on my business card, and a lot of games journalists do that.
Yep.
The only time was, I think, right before PAX East 2020, where someone left a voice message
Okay.
about their booth, I think.
Oh, all right.
And yeah, and I just, and again, maybe it's because I haven't been around as long as like a lot of industry veterans, but I kind of scratched my head at that. It just, I didn't think it was necessarily a bad thing, but I was just like, that's a way to go. But speaking of PAX East 2020, I just found that physical presence to be a lot more valuable. It kind of helped people stand out. Like when you start to recognize you start to recognize names when you send all these emails, and to put a face to the name, I think makes world of difference. And I can see why conventions are just such an essential thing for those developers, because like not only are you meeting these potential players, you're meeting these games journalists, but you're getting your project in their hand, in their physical hand. So, and that's tough to depend on, because conventions aren't every darn week, and
Right.
As we're recording this, we're at a time where conventions aren't happening in physical locations because of a pandemic. So who knows? Maybe phone calling was like a 90s aughts thing. That was just kind of like before my time. But generally, meeting people in person is super valuable, and that's harder for indie developers, because the EAs and the Activisions and the Ubisofts, they will generally have events for the press. Like they will invite them, they will fly them over and pay for their hotel,
right? Yep.
Like get them in a room and have them play their game. And like any developers just can't do that. They probably don't have the space or the resources or the money, so it's a lot harder. And who knows, there could be several ways that you and I haven't even thought of that people can do.
Yeah. It's. I think what it can come down to, outside of some of the things we already identified, it's probably just being creative and thinking outside of the box in terms of using these channels that we're already familiar with, but doing things that can really stand out. And that's always the $1 million question, right? Is like, what is that? But it's it's different for everybody. I think it could be in anything, but. No, good point. And I mean, I agree. Like, I think at the bottom line, though, if we were to boil what we just discussed about in it to one thing, it really comes out standing out and getting the kind of like that name recognition. And we mentioned all other different ways in which that can be accomplished. But that's what it is. I think that the name recognition more than anything. And then, of course, when you can put a face, great. But we're like we're in a time when that's more of a luxury at this point. But hopefully we'll start seeing that become more of a common thing as events and everything start picking up. But it looks like we got some time before that starts happening.
Probably, yeah. And who knows how these online things will work.
Exactly.
They recently announced that PAX West and / Australia is going to be
PAX Online.
Who knows? Who could say?
Yep. Cool. All right, so let's go into a little